Have you thought about in a significant way how powerful your mind is? How powerful the thoughts are that you have, the stories that you tell yourself, and what you allow into your energetic field and how that impacts and shapes your life overall? In today's podcast episode, I have my friend and NLP practitioner, Jayna Swan, and we're talking all about the mind, the stories we tell ourselves, and deconstructing what we think to be true versus what is actually true for us. If you love this conversation today, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Happiness Happens, and leave us a 5-star rating and a review to tell us how much you love our conversation and or the show overall. Thank you for being here today. Now let's get into our conversation with Jayna. Jayna, welcome to Happiness Happens. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited for our conversation. We are going to talk about so many different aspects. I feel like I say that in every podcast, but I'm really genuinely excited about our conversation because of where we're going to dive into. Before we go any further, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests when they come on the show, and it is, what does happiness mean to you?
Ooh, such a good question considering
Thank
it's going to
you.
be a different answer for everyone, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
bet. Because for me, happiness boils down to like, what are your values, is essentially what you're asking me. And for me, happiness and my value with happiness is growth and creation. And I found recently through not having creativity in my life, I had some boundaries around things that I realized how much creation means to me. And
Mm.
so for me, my happiness is very intertwined with bringing expression into this world, growing into myself and creating. So,
That is a beautiful answer. And I can confidently say that I don't think anyone on the podcast has given me that answer before. I love this notion of creativity. And I think this is where we get into the world or life of a business owner, an entrepreneur, even if you're working a regular corporate job, or even if you're, not working at all. I think there's a lot of demands that we have in our day to day that stifle our creativity really significantly. So I'm curious to hear more if you feel like sharing about the creative bubble that maybe you felt like you were stuck in, and a bit about how you started to navigate your way through. Because, as I mentioned in your intro to this episode, you focus in on NLP, and we're going to dive into all of that as well. But I would love to know your thoughts on this creative piece first.
oh, absolutely.
I'm sure it intertwines though.
Oh, yeah. It does intertwine because I took on a role with another company to train in NLP, which in this case is Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And it was a great role. The only thing was they didn't quite give me the creative freedom I was looking for. And I'm very
Mm.
much, even though everybody was advising me, ask for forgiveness, not permission, I am such a rule follower that I was like, tell me what I can do and what
Yeah.
I can't do. And it was that I just found myself in a space where being told I couldn't create, I had never experienced that before. I have been working for myself for over a decade now, and I've been heavy into content creation for about 14 years. So to have someone say, no, you can't do that, or it needs to be approved by people, like I was like, oh gosh. So I found myself really like fiending. Like it almost was like an addiction. And I was like kind of having withdrawals. And I was like, I have to create something. I went to my personal trainer. I'm like, can I record a video for you in the gym? I need to create something. And like, I'm like trying to find outlets. I'm like, maybe I'll go back to writing my book. Maybe I'll go to this. It's like I've always had all of these things happening because it's creation and growth are so intertwined for me because I'm always learning new skills to be
Hmm.
able to create more, to be able to grow more. And it's like just a constant loop.
I love that. I love that so much. It makes me think back to my corporate days. I say all the time to myself, I don't know that I could ever go back to corporate because I cannot even fathom the thought of someone telling me what to do every single day. Like, I don't even like when people tell me what to do like in my personal life, like, no, let alone when I'm working. My
My
mom used to
gosh.
tell me all the time when we worked in corporate, Simona, you got to play the game. You got to play the game. And I'm like, I don't want to play any games. I want to play
Yep.
my game called let me go for a walk at lunch and let me have peace and quiet. Like,
Yeah, like I felt the same way. I had been essentially living outside of a box for about a
Mm,
decade, and to try and shove myself into someone else's box, cramming myself in, realizing I wasn't going to fit. I needed to cut parts of me off. And
mm,
I didn't want those skills and those parts of me to atrophy. I didn't want to lose
mhm,
them over time, because if you stop creating, I've stepped away from social media for about 6 months because of all of this,
mhm.
deleted everything that I had. And now I'm getting back into it. It's like, wow, okay, this is what beginners feel like again. It's like, oh my gosh, pressing go and pressing record is
Yeah.
it's something to get over again, because it's a habit like anything. And it used to be so easy. And not to say it's not going to come back like any muscle. We have muscle memory, but at the same time, you got to realize those things early. And I'm so glad I was only 6 months down that path, where I started to go, oh my gosh, I feel suffocated.
Yeah.
What is causing this? And it was like, oh, I
Yeah.
need to create. Okay. I need to be free. I'm an innovator. I'm not someone who can just take a script and repeat it over and over.
Mhm,
I have to think for myself. And I
mhm.
love to think for myself and create. And getting back into podcasting has been huge for me as well, because I love getting to share these ideas with people. And I know that you, like me, our brains, we just go and we have so many conversations internally. And I'm like, I just want to get this out to the world. So I'm really excited to be able to do that here for you guys on this show, as well as other shows that have been able to be asked to be on. It's so much fun to just express yourself freely in a way
Mm,
that can help people.
I love that. And in the theme of this creative box, if you will, let's talk a little bit about the creative container that is NLP. And you mentioned NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Can you tell our listener today just a little bit about what exactly it is and like how it starts to rewire?
Yeah, because those words can be super confusing, right? It's like, what is all this? So I'll break it
I thought it
down.
was tapping,
Ah, okay. Yeah,
but that's EFT.
yep, EMFT, I believe
EM,
in.
yeah, I'm like, don't even know.
It's okay. It's totally fine. So what's happening with NLP is the N, neuro, means the mind or the brain. You can think your neurology. Then you have linguistic, which is our language or the words that we're using. And then we have programming, the patterns that we have, or you can say like the results you're getting in life. So, what we're doing with neuro linguistic programming is we're saying your thoughts and your words create the reality that you have and the results you're getting.
Hmm.
So, if you're not happy with the results you're getting, we need to take a step back and realize there is something in our identity, our belief system, and our values that's not in alignment. There's something off in the way that we're perceiving the world. Can you agree two people can sit right next to each other at an event and have totally different outcomes and experiences?
1000%.
That's because we are meaning making machines.
Hmm.
We're literally applying meaning to every aspect of life. We could sit down and we could have two listeners to this conversation, and one's like, and the other one's like, oh my gosh, it was the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
Two meaning make. That's because maybe one person has a belief system going into listening to this conversation where they're like, I'm going to get one piece of gold from this. So the reality that they have is that their thoughts are constantly seeking that nugget of gold. And then their words after the fact are, oh, this one thing stuck with me, because that was their intention going in. So
Hmm.
their perspective is going to reflect that, versus someone else who might be like, I just want to be entertained. They might not walk away with a lesson. They might be like, well, it was entertaining. Or someone else who's like, hey, someone recommended it. I'm doing it because I'm obligated,
Yeah.
because I told them I would.
Yeah.
Each of those scenarios is going to get a totally different result, because that person's thoughts and language are different. So with
Hmm.
NLP, I sit down with somebody and I listen to them from a linguistic point of view. How are they saying things? Because we're
Hmm.
always telling stories. I was just saying this the other day to someone. I find I'm becoming aware of something I have said a lot, which is on stage when I have a flip chart, which
Hmm.
does not come with spell check, I usually say, I was put on this planet to speak and not spell. I apologize if I fub up here. Do you know that every time I say that, my unconscious mind is saying, okay, we don't need to learn how to spell. It's okay.
Hmm.
Hmm. It is locking me into, I don't know how to spell. And I'm okay with that, because that excuse is now letting me off the hook. And that's a story I keep perpetuating because I keep telling it. So now I have the awareness. So now I notice when I don't say it. I notice because that is also giving my unconscious mind now permission to, now I can become a better speller
Mm,
because I'm giving myself that space. So those words matter because the words that we're saying are labels. They're labels. They all mean something different. Success
mm,
means something different to you than me, right? Balance means something different from you to me. Self-care means something different. But those labels that we're using, most people think they're describing the world around them. Truly, our words are creating the world around us because what you visualize and what you see, once you label that as good or bad, hot or cold, whatever, that's how you'll perceive it because
mhm.
your mind has to make that true. It wants you to be true all the time because we are always righteous beings, right? Because we're right about everything, right?
As you were saying that, I think of multiple scenarios of things that I do all the time. What's the difference between the language creating the thought and the actual reality versus leveraging language to find relatability? So I'll give you an example. I was giving a talk earlier this year, and at the beginning of the talk, and I say this often, or like, we're gonna have so much fun today. And also, I'm gonna throw in like 500 really bad dad jokes because I just absolutely tell the worst jokes in the entire world. Because like they are. No, they're not the worst, but they're like definitely really cheesy and really whatever. And then people laugh. But I wouldn't take that and internalize that as I'm a terrible joke teller. I'm just honoring the fact that I love to tell cheesy jokes. Like, is there a difference between both, or is our mind taking that and creating it as true for us, regardless of what we think on the outside we're doing?
Yeah, those little vicious things, they actually are insidious and they do burrow their way in there
Mm,
because we wouldn't say it if it wasn't true for us.
true.
Unless you're reading a script, you wouldn't say it. So even though you're like, no, my jokes really rock it, like obviously they laughed, there is some part of you, no matter how small, that truly believes that your jokes aren't good.
Hmm.
And it may have just been one experience of one person not laughing at a joke once, but that
And
part of you.
you just like ingrain that into your
Mhm.
subconscious. It could be like someone in like high school that you wouldn't even have
Yep.
any. Wow.
Yeah, because our brain remembers everything. On a conscious level, it's only 5% of our brain. So if you sit there and try and remember that moment, it might be really hard because you're going to be like, I don't know. But your unconscious or your subconscious mind is 95% of your brain. It remembers everything from the moment you were conceived till today. It's just, it takes special tools to tap into that stuff.
That is
So
crazy.
it likely happened when you were 2 or 3. You heard someone tell a joke, they got a big laugh. You try to tell the joke again yourself to get the laugh. Maybe you didn't tell it right. And maybe it just didn't land and you didn't get the laugh. And you're like, oh, they're funny. I'm not, right?
Hmm.
That one decision that I'm not funny, that's how a limiting belief is created. And then that leads into everything. Now, the other thing that can happen is you may be using that as a way to lighten the load and actually make yourself funnier on stage because it
Hmm.
makes you relatable, right? But I would caution you to just look at your language because it can install in someone that I'm going to be telling jokes today and they aren't going to be funny. And you're like
Right.
telling them not to laugh versus
Yeah.
I'm going to tell some jokes today and well, they might be a lot like yours, kind of not funny sometimes. Like, or like make a joke.
Mm.
You can kind of make it a little less true and a little more jovial.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, all jokes are funny. It just depends on who your audience is. And so it's like tell the joke for the audience. Tell the joke in a way that it can teach. And any joke can be enhanced the more ambiguous you go. The more ambiguity you add to your language, the funnier it is because people now there's gaps for them to fill, right? There's room for interpretation. And
Hmm.
that's when people start to get into the realm of innuendos. And then people start laughing because there's a difference between a literal listener and an inferential listener.
Hmm.
So like if I worked with someone who was very literal and I was talking about my partner and he was struggling emotionally, and I said, his heart's just in a really weird place right now. She goes, oh my God, is he okay? She thought it literally his heart had moved in his chest. She's like, I didn't know that could happen. And I was like, oh, wait,
Oh no.
hyper literal listener, hyper literal. So I had to be like, oh no, I'm sorry. His emotions are all over the place right now. She's like, oh, okay. Now I'm inferential. So
I
if
am
you were to
too.
say something to me, I'm
Yeah.
automatically going to go to a dirty joke in my mind.
Yep.
It's
Exactly.
always a that's what she said joke every single time. And that's just, there's a difference in listening skills, right? Like these are the types of things I'll work with with clients or teaching. Because if we can understand first how we listen and how we speak,
Mm.
because you might be an inferential listener, but maybe you're a literal speaker. Maybe when you
Mm.
get thirsty, do you say, I'm thirsty? Or do you say, hey, can you get me a drink? Because that person who's very literal is like, hey, can you get me a drink? The other person is like, yeah, okay. Now, if you're an inferential speaker, I'm really thirsty. If you're talking to a literal listener, they're going to go, mm-hmm. They're going to go, no, 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 I'm really, really thirsty. They're going to go, I too once have thirsted. You're like, no, can you get me a drink? And it's like, oh, okay, why didn't you just say that the first time?
Right.
It's like, are you asking me to get you a drink? These are such small things, right? But if you can figure out, like, say, if you knew your partner
Hmm.
and their listening style and their speaking style, you think it'd make it easier to communicate in your relationship?
1000%.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I don't want to say I've never met, but maybe I haven't been aware or had the awareness around how literal some people can be. And so sometimes I'll say something and it's literally taken word for word. And I'm like, that's not what I meant at all. And it's like, oh, but I just, but you, that's exactly what you said. And I'm like, but
Mhm.
that's not what I meant. And they're like, but that's what you said. And I'm like, huh. So that's really interesting in my mind of how to take thoughts out and how we say them. So
Mhm.
this ultimately, if you think of NLP as a whole entire practice, like yes, you're rewiring the programming within your own mind, but the byproduct of that would be, and you tell me if you agree or if there's additions, I hope there's things to add to this, your relationships and your business and like all the other things you do.
Mhm. Yeah, I literally just get people unstuck with the power of their own mind because we're all stuck on something.
Mm-hmm.
It's either our physical health, our spirituality, our family, our personal growth, our relationships. And all of those stucknesses, they all come from blind spots, weaknesses, limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like we said, we see the world from our own perspective. And so we can shift that perspective. So, my job, when I'm sitting in front of someone who's working with me, my job is to not listen to their story. My job is actually to find ways to shift that story to support where they want to go. As I literally will sit down and say, where do you want to go? What's the outcome you want to get to? Like, give me a target to shoot for. And then as I listen to you and ask certain questions and hear your answer, if that answer and that story you're telling me does not support your goal, I'm going to find a way to help you flip your perspective on that. Because
Mm-hmm.
I want you to be able to see the world in a supportive way.
Yeah.
You know, I have so many business owners who come to me and they're like, I'm just not making money and this and that. They'll complain, complain, complain. And I'm like, okay, boil it down. Do you really think you deserve this money? And that word is so hard for people because they're either on the hard no, I don't deserve it. I did these things when I was younger and I don't, or they're on the hard, I absolutely deserve it. And that too is wounded. That too is someone who still has something to balance out because
Mm.
where we really want to get in life is this neutrality. Close a big sale at work, don't get excited, neutral. Don't get down, neutral. Feel the emotion, but like don't let it override you. That's when you have power. That's the true power is being able to allow things to happen to you, but you control your perspective of it. Stepping away from this role was a really difficult decision. It's something I wanted and worked for 3 years, hundreds of hours, hundreds of thousands of dollars into learning these things, gave away services, like you name it. I got the role, so excited, and it didn't feel right.
Hmm.
There was something in it. I'm so kinesthetic, so I can tap in and feel myself very, very clearly. And what we say is when there is a lack of rapport, there's resistance. So when you're feeling resistance with, like, say, if we were having resistance in this conversation, I immediately would go back to trying to establish rapport. I would do all sorts of things. Mhm.
Yeah, I noticed what you did. I saw you. I saw you,
Yep.
Jayna. If you're not watching this episode and you're listening to this, I've been sitting with my hand on my chin, just like really listening. And Jayna just did that. She just moved her hand onto her chin. And I instantly was like, I see what you're doing there. You're creating that safety. I love that.
Makes you feel like we're alike each other. And it's
Mm.
great. So what happens when I feel like I'm not on path and I'm feeling that off feeling something's not right? There's resistance here. Whenever I feel like I'm having to work for things, if it's not easy and it's not effortless, not that we shouldn't put energy in, but that it
Mhm.
should have some sort of ease to it. That resistance just means that there is a lack of rapport with my own subconscious mind.
Mhm.
I'm not on path. I'm not living my purpose. That is my greater portion of my mind, my subconscious mind, the part of us that beats our heart and blinks our eyes and runs when there's a lion chasing us. Like that part of you that is a deeper knowing, that part of you is going to notify you when things are wrong. That's what anxiety is. That's what fear is. That's what they're just little, like little notification bells going, hey, this is important.
Mm-hmm.
This is important. I need you to focus on this. And it's not telling you things are good or bad. It's just saying, hey, your attention needs to be here. And that's it. And then once you recognize, okay, I have anxiety. What is it? Okay, that thing is important. Put my focus there. It goes away.
But how do you start to like differentiate between, so for example, in the last, I want to say like the last year, and I won't like deep dive too deeply into all the specifics, but in the last year, there have been so many different situations in my life that have caused me to have this like still continued underlying guilt, but for things that I have nothing to be guilty over. But it's more of this idea of, and I'm starting to piece all of the things together, but like that guilt paired with intense anxiety and like all this stuff, but it's not paralyzing to the point where I can't function in my day to day. It's
Mhm.
just a constant hum in the back of my mind. And I guess it's the easiest way to describe it. And I'm aware of it, but it's also with all of these different modalities, all of these different tools that we can use. Like I was having a conversation with someone recently, also on the podcast, about IFS, internal family systems, right? And so you have all of these different things. How do you even figure out where you want to start? Like
So you asked a couple questions
I
there.
did.
Yeah.
I'm like, help me. No, I'm just kidding. Validate my question. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, first thing that came up when chatting was if it's still there, how is it serving you? Because you are getting something from it, or else you would overcome it. It's kind of like there's a story of an old man who sits on his front porch in his rocking chair and he's just rocking back and forth. And every now and again, you'll hear his dog yelp, yelp. People are like, what's going on? He's like, it's okay. Yelp, yelp. No, it's the dog. Okay, what's happening? It's okay. He's sleeping on a nail. It's like, what? Why doesn't he get up and move? It's not hurting him enough. And the point
Mm.
is that there can be something that is like, it's poking you, it's hurting you, that anxious feeling, that guilt that you're carrying, but it's not painful enough for you to get up and do anything about it. You're just going to sit there and
Interesting.
keep talking about it the whole time. So if you find yourself talking about something, I would give you like the rule of two or rule of three is if you talk to three different people about the same thing, you're getting something from that. You're not
Yeah.
actually looking for change. You're getting something from the attention or the whatever it is, right? I don't
Yeah.
want to suggest anything, but
Yeah.
that's where I would ask is like, what is the benefit? And like really think about it because everything in life has both pros and cons. I read a really good book, Wired for Wealth. I know you may
Mm.
have read that as well. And it's such a good book because he talks about and really hones in that point is you must find both the benefit and the deficit with everything in life, both the good and bad. Making $1 million, there are benefits and deficits to that. Losing $1 million, there are benefits and deficits. And when you can
Yeah.
find and balance the scale, that's when life gets a little what we might call easier.
I love that. And also, too, it's been a lot of unlearning. And here's the thing, and why I honestly love having conversations like this on my podcast is because there can be so many different sources and ways in which that things are connected. So whereas in the past, if I talked about something in specific, doesn't matter what it is. If I talked about something in specific, because I am that person, I will go and ask 500 different people the same question because I'm like, someone validate me,
Mhm.
until I realized that literally no one in my life is ever going to validate me. I need to learn how to validate me. So it doesn't really matter what choice I make. At the end of the day, I have to be good with that choice. That said, when you grow up not knowing or learning how to trust who you are, it's almost impossible to validate your own self without awareness around it because you don't actually know that that's the thing that you're missing. So that's my next phase of like evolution of self, but that's not here nor there. And we don't need to talk about like that. We don't have to talk about me in the specific point of our interview, but our conversation,
No,
but
but this is so good though, because so many people go through this as they're like,
it's
well,
true.
I've, they look backwards and they're like, well, my pattern is, again, watching your words, because if you say
Mhm.
that, that means patterns do what? They continue.
They
So if
continue.
you're saying this is my pattern, You are doing a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're likely going to see it. If you say,
Mm,
in the past, I have experienced, or in the past, this has happened, right? Is the fact that maybe in the past, this one thing has happened over and over, and you're just seeing that pattern. So you're like, oh, of course, that's what's going to happen again.
yeah.
Well, then, of course, that's what's going to happen again.
Yeah.
Versus looking at those patterns and going, what choice did I make to get that? Okay, let me try the opposite. Let me try something different. Now, here's something you can do is if you are that person who you see that pattern, you're like, I don't trust myself because I haven't made good choices in the past. How can I trust myself moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you actually can rely on your subconscious mind to make decisions way better than your conscious mind ever will. And you can lean into your body for that. So
Mm.
there's a couple different things that you can do, and they're like one of them, a really simple one is to just like put your hands over your belly, stand up straight, ask yourself a question, close your eyes, and whether you lean backwards or forwards, I'll give you an answer.
What
You
way is
can
what?
say, well, you ask yourself first. So
Oh, okay.
you say, show me a yes. And your body, mine typically will lean forward. And show me a no. And my body will typically lean back. That's me thing. You know, you could also do
Yeah.
show me a maybe. And sometimes it'll lean one side or another. Now, then you say, okay, and you ask it yes or no questions. And the other form is putting your hand down on a desk where you tuck your pinky finger and your ring finger under your,
Okay.
so that your pointer fingers are kind of resting.
Okay.
And you do the same thing. Show me a yes. And my pointer finger just moved. Show me a no. My middle finger just moved. And then you would go and you'd ask yourself those questions and you would let that wait until that finger moves. And those are just micro movements. And those micro movements are coming from the unconscious. It's coming
That's
from
so
the
cool.
part of your brain that just knows. And so it's just one way to lean into answers and to ask yourself things, but you have to be very specific with your questions and be ask good questions.
Yeah, right.
Because when you're asking yes or no questions, ask good questions because we can get not great answers if we don't ask good
Exactly.
questions.
And then you like derail your whole entire life
Yep.
because you're like, it gave me a no or it gave me a yes. And then you
Yes.
end up and you're like, but it said. Anyways,
There is a
um,
level of logic that we need in this world.
absolutely. And I also think too, the more that we tap into this part of our mind, the easier receiving that guidance happens. And
Mhm.
also the faster you can drop back in
Mhm.
to checking in with your own self. I love that. Jayna, before I ask you my last question of the podcast, which you're just gonna have to come back. We'll have to do a repeat interview on this one because I feel like we could talk for actual hours. I would love if you could please share how my listener can work with you and about your app as well and your podcast.
First and foremost is the podcast. I think you guys are all already podcast listeners. If you are a woman who is navigating life and wants to improve your connection with yourself and other people, the Connection Equation is the new podcast that's coming out, and it is just for that. It's truly all about relationships, and our relationships start with us. And so we can connect better with our families. We can connect better with our clients, with our listeners, all through utilizing these communication skills, utilizing these different ways of showing up with authenticity. So,
Mm.
those are really passionate topics we'll get into. It's a hybrid show. Sometimes I'll deep dive on something where I want to teach something and I get like really passionate. And other times I'll bring someone in like this and we'll just have a really chill conversation about something. Really excited. We also have the app, which is brand new. It's coming out. It's in a beta process right now. We are working on getting this into the App Store. And the app is called Her Embodiment. Now, Her stands for Healthy Emotional Regulation, which is really cool because I work with a majority women now. And what I'm hearing constantly is that they get stuck in their head, constantly stuck in like I'm strategizing, I'm working, and what that screams to me is masculine energy, masculine energy, masculine energy, which is totally cool and necessary in business and in life. But here's the thing is like women, we get tense. Women, we have a lot of tension. Our bodies can't handle that too long. We weren't meant to be in that mode that long. So, this app is your way to teach you how to come back to your body. This is your opportunity to learn to connect deeper with yourself. It utilizes modalities like movement. So there's guided movement meditations, there's freestyle, there's stretching and core work, anything to just kind of get you moving. There's meditations, whether that's you sitting down and listening to a guided meditation or picking a journal prompt and setting the timer and just journaling. There's also a ton of book recommendations in there. I'm huge on learning, so I offer all of them as resources. And then we also have a mindfulness section where we talk about mindfulness with the food consumption, with our online consumption, because you are what you consume, and that's your social media and your food,
Yep.
as well as mindfulness around money, because I think it's extremely important to learn how money works. And not that I'm like, a fiduciary or someone who's like got all this, credibility. I'm not going to teach you money. I'm just going to have you become aware about where is it coming from and where is it going to. Are you spending money because you're coping, or are you spending money because you're investing into yourself? Like there's
Mm.
very different places that we come from when we spend money.
Mhm.
And it's really just bringing mindfulness to life. So movement, meditation, and mindfulness are what we utilize so that we can find that healthy emotional regulation. Because I want women to have a space to come and decompress so that we don't snap at our kids, yell at our husbands, fire someone because we're emotional, right? Make these irrational decisions because we're reacting. So
Mhm.
this is your place that can go with you on your phone. You can get to it on a computer, however you want when you're traveling on the go. If you just need to pop it in and you need a moment, there's also you can join the community as well because there is a membership. And with that membership, you have a community full of women to chat with. There's trackers on there. So you can see leaderboards. You can like follow up with friends and have a little healthy competition.
Mhm.
Everybody likes a little bit of that.
Yep. Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm really, really excited to bring this to you. And other ways to work with me are I have some masterclass series, which I'm really excited about because if you haven't figured this out, I'm really big on knowledge, really big on learning. I love it. And teaching things that I've learned because I know the power of them
Mm.
is something that I'm huge about. So you'll learn in the podcast, yes. You'll learn in the app to a degree. You will experience more in the app, but you will learn in these master classes.
Yeah.
These are scheduled once a month for 2 hours, and they're just a deep dive. It's like all in, it's experiential. You'll go through activities, you'll work with other people, or you may show up and it might be just you and me one day. And the next thing you know, you got a one-on-one with me on a specific topic. And it's just my way of giving back. So everything that we're doing right now is a one-to-many setup so that you can learn at a more approachable rate,
I
right?
love that.
And being able to connect in a way that everybody can access. I'd love this knowledge to be in more hands than it is right now.
Beautiful. I love that. One to many. I really like that. That's amazing. I'm going to put all of those links in the notes below so everyone can connect with you and check everything out. Jayna, my last question for you, and it's a question that I ask all my guests, and it is, what is one way my listener can create a little more happiness in their day, every day, starting today?
Ooh, I love this. I would encourage you, this is something I give to everybody, is pick 2 songs a day to dance to in the morning.
Ooh.
Add it to your morning routine. I would encourage the first song to be slow and likely sensual, something you can just feel yourself with. It kind of wakes you up. The idea is to just get yourself moving. And the second song should be a hype song. It should be something that you absolutely cannot not dance to. Like you have to just get up and like jump around, clap your hands, whatever it is that you can do. And I'll tell you, if you start your morning with those 2 songs, it'll be less than 5 minutes of your time and you will have energized yourself more than any cup of coffee ever will.
Beautiful. I love that. Jayna, thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're so very welcome. I was excited to be on the show and I'm so sad it's ending. We'll
I
have to do
know.
another episode.
Oh, we're gonna have to please open invite to come back as many times as you want. I love that. Thank you, and thank you so much for listening to today's episode on Happiness Happens. I am so grateful that you're here. Please connect with both of us. Let us know what you think of our conversation today. Rate and review the show as well so I can hear what you love if you don't want to reach out. And I hope you have the most beautiful day today. I hope you have an amazing week ahead. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.